What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel and another Birthright domain review here for our Eastern Marches as we're continuing on here. And so last time we looked at the Chimeron, today we're going to look at actually a good one, and that's one that's available for players, and that's Coeranys. And that has an interesting history as well, so we'll touch on that here. So this one's actually chaotic good, and essentially, at least at the outset here, is a kingdom that doesn't really, interfere with the other kingdoms and kind of just wants the same treatment in return. So essentially trying to be as neutral as possible. And as it says here, unfortunately it doesn't always get that. So again, it's recommended. And we have a decent amount of provinces here to start with, 6. And by and large, still sparsely settled, although we do have a couple of 4s, level 4s here to start with, and then 1-3 there in Bog's End. Again, we can see that the law is pretty well covered. Temples is mostly one way here. We'll get into that again in detail. Guild situation is going to be a little bit more complicated, and then sources is also somewhat straightforward there. So the regent, Olivier Cariel, and you might recognize that name from the other domain, Cariel in the Northern Marches, which again we'll touch on here, is so she's a level 2 fighter, solid bloodline, again chaotic good. She's the ruler. Although her great-great-grandmother founded the domain that bears her name, the Gladnil clan ruling there has excised her family from that land gradually until none of them remain. So they basically fled here and built a new domain. Cariel, an independent woman, demands little from her people and expects little in return. However, she feels a deep responsibility for the welfare of the citizens, and she drives herself to keep them free. She controls almost none of the law of her land, although she uses her law holdings and the gold from her trade routes to force off those who would take up the law for their own ends. So, that being said, as you can see, she has law in all of her provinces. It's just none of it's maxed out. But that would be an opportunity there just to expand a little bit while still kind of not being, sort of a dictator or a draconian about anything. So, but shoring up control of your domain is always a good first step just to avoid outside interference. So, lieutenants, she does have one here. So, Medlaurier Hainson, again, is priest here, and really impressive bloodline there. So, is the High Hierophant of the life and protection of Vanelay, serves as her personal aide and advisor, and helps contribute regency to keep the residents of this land free. Like the regent, she feels devoted to Coeranys and desires little more than its freedom from Osorde and Gore, who seek to exploit it. And so now Osorde, which we'll cover in an upcoming video, there's that ongoing civil war there. So there is potential to sort of mitigate the danger or influence or issues with that domain. But Gore, as we've covered in an earlier video when we did the Heartlands, is essentially the powerhouse of the Heartlands, and unfortunately that domain, being as large as it is, borders on a lot of other domains, and again just an absolute military juggernaut. So that is going to be one of your primary challenges, is staving off any efforts there. But again, worth cultivating some other alliances, which we'll cover here as we go through. The captain of the guard is a fellow named Edric Berenstein, a consummate horseman and swordsman. He bears numerous scars gained protecting his regent from past attempts on her life, which would seem to put his loyalty beyond question, except that someone has seized his wife and child. The kidnapper will release them only if he steps aside, and then obviously he needs to find a way out of this as soon as possible. So that would be like an immediate first problem to deal with there if you are running this domain. Can't have a compromised captain of your guard, right? Now, the 7 provinces of Coeranys remain sparsely populated since most people have fled the kingdom's rainy environment, seeking sunnier climes. So that is an issue there, but nonetheless worth trying to, wherever possible, rule up the domain a little bit more and find ways to attract people to that. So that will be also one of your other challenges. Now, important NPCs, several guilds have established trading interests here, but not have proven themselves equal to the task of winning over a ruler hostile to their presence. Only the guild of Baruch Ajik, controlled by Dirk Watershold, remains fully welcome in Coeranys, and that's only because he comes here irregularly. Still, Watershold and Cariel have an understanding, and the dwarf brings more than gold when he comes here. He also contributes regency to the kingdom in exchange for unknown favors. So that'll be something that a DM will have to figure out with the player what the nature of that is and how that's going to affect you running your domain. Now, on the magic side, the three brother mages who seek to conquer the magic of the Chimeron also hold some sources in Coeranys, although they steer clear of the sunken lands on the Oserde border. Whether they do so out of respect or fear of what lies within, no one knows. So again, fruitful sort of adventure hook there, or plot hook for the overall campaign. And certainly also worth exploring, just in case there are, or there's a threat in that area towards your domain, which again we've kind of briefly touched on when we talked about the Chimeron. So the description of Coeranys itself then. The wide, rolling country of Coeranys ends in the southeast at the gulf that bears its name. The kingdom's terrain varies between grass and swamp, making it prime territory for horses and cattle. Those who tend the roaming herds are known as land runners. These rangers, trained from birth to know the animals of Coeranys, hold sole responsibility for the roaming animals of the plains. They ward the animals from dangers both human and natural. They reap the highest respect in Coeranys for their work, keeps money pouring into their domain, and certainly something that would be worth making sure that those the people doing that role in your kingdom again are well taken care of. So, and depending on whether you're adventuring here or just running the domain, but if you're adventuring, that could be an interesting one where you're maybe starting off in that role, and then something happens to force you sort of into more dangerous missions and things like that in service of the domain. So, storms boiling down from the mountains of Baruch Azik and rumbling across the heartlands find Coeranys their eventual destination. It's rare that a whole day remains clear, so the whole of this land remains well watered constantly. The two common swamps and bogs make peat gathering a normal labor. The inhabitants of Coeranys find themselves happily free. The kingdom is their idea of paradise, and they'll defend it as necessary. These passionate, dedicated people live their lives in joy. The capital, Ruorven, sits along the river that springs out of Elenian swampland. Any of Elenier's goods coming down the river reach Ruorven first, enabling Coeranys to tax them as necessary. So again, nice source of income there. So geography-wise, I always tended to think of Coeranys a little bit like England, I guess, just kind of constant rain with the occasional bit of bright weather there. But lots of opportunity geographically. So you have a river with, of course, natural trading implications there. You have a coastline, and again, easy to potentially work on establishing more long-distance trade routes there, whether it's to other parts of Anawir, the Canasi to the east, or just other domains in general. So plenty of opportunity there if properly cultivated. Now, unfortunately, this is, again, one of the shorter descriptions for domains, so we don't get sort of the double-wide page here. So we don't really know about any actual existing military forces or anything, but something, again, a player and a DM would want to come up with. Ideally, you should have maybe a minuscule defense force available to you at the start. But again, certainly with the issues of some of your neighboring domains, worth at least not initially trying to be overly aggressive, but having a just a respectable sort of defensive force just to keep some of these other domains at bay and keep any adventurism on their part maybe in check. So biggest challenges here are going to be figuring out a way to capitalize off of the guild situation without, again, creating any unnecessary enemies there. Definitely cultivate the relationship with the dwarves, because there's lots of potential there. Temple-wise, you have your Hierophant that you already partner with there. So worth, again, I think, focusing on that, but also at the same time avoiding any actual religious conflicts. But initially, I think would be worthwhile cultivating your law holdings a little bit, bring those up a little bit more. Currently, there's no one else contesting your law in the nation, but again, that could very rapidly change. So worth doing that, and then potentially, at least maybe starting with your capital, raising that up a little bit more, maybe to a 5, and then just seeing how things develop. But, so overall, not too many major threats compared to some of the domains, but there's certainly there and some challenges to take care of right away. And from there, It just depends on how issues in neighboring realms are playing out in your campaign. So, if you were looking at expansion, just depending on what goes on, it may be worth, if you can cultivate enough of an army without, again, sort of threatening or appearing as a threat to Gore or giving them any kind of pretext for invasion, maybe dipping into Oserde a little bit and maybe taking an extra province or something like that. But again, all depends on the campaign you're running. So let us know in the comments, guys, if you have played Coeranys, or if you just adventured in and around there. Lots of fun to be had, certainly. And always interesting to hear about how other people have played various domains in their campaigns and how those have transformed and what is ultimately what the end result was of the campaign. So hit us up in the comments there, guys. Love to hear about what your thoughts are on Coeranys, and we will be continuing on as we continue to work through the Eastern Marches. So thanks so much, guys. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.